In June 2020, the Galwan Valley became the site of a brutal clash between Indian and Chinese soldiers. Under the cover of darkness. Watch the video until the end. Subscribe to the channel and don't forget to like the video and comment. The Chinese forces used machetes, clubs with nails, and batons wrapped in barbed wire to attack Indian soldiers, resulting in the deaths of 20 Indian soldiers. India retaliated, causing the deaths of around 40 Chinese soldiers. This wasn't just a skirmish, it was a turning point in Asia's geopolitical landscape. The Galwan clash marked a dramatic shift in the relationship between two nuclear powers, India and China, and left an indelible mark on international relations. Watch the video until the end. Subscribe to the channel and don't forget to like the video and comment. Why did this clash matter so much? The Galwan Valley is a strategically important region, offering access to critical supply routes and military mobility. Control of this area would give either country a significant advantage in defending or asserting dominance in the region. After the deadly confrontation, India swiftly ramped up its military presence along the line of actual control, LAC, deploying an additional 50,000 troops by the end of the year. But it wasn't just about increasing the number of soldiers. India also fortified its defense infrastructure and armed forces, sending a clear message. India wasn't going to be intimidated or stay silent anymore. Watch the video until the end. Subscribe to the channel and don't forget to like the video and comment. However, it wasn't just the military response that caught the world's attention. India also engaged diplomatically, holding talks with China to defuse tensions, but without conceding any ground. Meanwhile, China faced international backlash and growing isolation for its aggression. The global community began to question China's assertiveness, and by early 2021, China had started pulling back its troops and easing its aggressive stance along the border. For India, the Galwan clash wasn't just a reactive moment, it marked a shift toward a proactive defense strategy. Since then, India has made significant advancements in its border security. The country revamped its surveillance systems, deploying advanced drones to monitor the LAC and strengthen reconnaissance efforts. By 2024, India's border infrastructure had undergone massive upgrades, ensuring that it was prepared for future threats. But India isn't just focusing on military upgrades. It has also forged strategic alliances, particularly with the United States, Japan, and other countries in the region, creating a coalition to counter China's growing influence and territorial ambitions. These partnerships are more than just symbolic, they involve intelligence sharing, coordinated military strategies, and a united front to challenge China's aggressiveness in Asia. Additionally, India has invested heavily in border infrastructure. In 2024, the Indian government allocated a massive $6 billion to develop a 2,000 kilometers network of strategic roads connecting military bases to remote areas in the Himalayas. These infrastructure projects are critical for ensuring that India's military can operate efficiently in the challenging terrain of the border region. This strategic buildup is not just about defense. It's about sending a message to China that India is fully prepared to protect its interests and respond to any future threats. Watch the video until the end. Subscribe to the channel and don't forget to like the video and comment. But is this enough to deter China from making future attempts at aggression? Probably not. China's territorial ambitions are far from over, and as it continues to push its influence, India must remain vigilant. India's strategy of strengthening military preparedness, fortifying alliances, and investing in border infrastructure is a clear indication that the country is no longer willing to play a passive role. The Galwan clash may have been the catalyst, but the broader shift in India's approach to national security is now in full swing, signaling that India is not backing down from its place on the global stage. The growing tensions in Asia are far from over, and India's bold stance is making waves throughout the region. The next chapter in the India-China rivalry is still being written, and the world is watching closely to see how this critical relationship will evolve. Watch the video until the end. Subscribe to the channel and don't forget to like the video and comment. Germany economy crisis, corporate bankruptcies, German financial problems, 2024 economic challenges, failing businesses in Germany, German market collapse, business closure in Germany, financial struggles Germany, bankruptcy surge in Germany, Germany recession 2024, German economy news, global economic impact 2024, German industry downturn, economic decline in Germany, German companies facing bankruptcy, financial collapse, Germany economy slowdown, rising debt in Germany, corporate insolvency. Business failure news. Economic recovery Germany. India is really stepping up its game to keep China's influence in check, and it's doing this in a smart, multifaceted way. One of the key strategies India has been using is its Act East policy, which is essentially about building stronger ties with Southeast Asia and the surrounding regions. This has involved a lot of military agreements with countries like Vietnam, Japan, and Indonesia, all aimed at balancing China's growing presence in the region. Let's dive into some of the specific projects India's been working on. First, there's the Chabahar port in Iran. This port gives India a new route to Central Asia, bypassing Pakistan and putting India in a strategic position right across from China's Gwadar port. Then, there's the deep-sea port at Sabang in Indonesia, which is located near the crucial Malacca Strait, one of the world's most important shipping choke points. India also has access to the Changi Naval Base in Singapore, which is also near this critical waterway. But that's not all. India is building up ports in Myanmar and Bangladesh, and has access to Chittagong port in Bangladesh as well. Plus, they've made agreements with Oman to use naval facilities near the Strait of Hormuz, a vital passage for global oil exports. The positioning of these ports is no accident. They are strategically located in some of the most important maritime regions in the world, all designed to counter China's growing reach. And to back this up, India, along with the Quad countries, the US, Japan, and Australia, regularly conducts joint military exercises in the Indian Ocean, showing a united front to keep China in check. India isn't just focusing on physical infrastructure. It's also setting up a comprehensive network of coastal surveillance radar, CSR, systems. These radar systems are key to monitoring China's navy as it moves through the Bay of Bengal, the Maldives, and other parts of the Indian Ocean. India's already set up CSR systems in countries like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, the Seychelles, and Mauritius, with plans to expand this network even further. The goal? To keep a close watch on China's naval movements and strengthen security in the region. On top of all this, India is investing big in its own naval strength. The country's eastern naval base, Visakhapatnam, is getting a $1 billion upgrade, which will enhance surveillance, logistics, and rapid deployment capabilities. India is also turning the Andaman and Nicobar Islands into a major hub for monitoring sea traffic, further extending its reach and capabilities. India's naval strength is growing quietly but steadily. Just recently, they commissioned their second nuclear-powered submarine, INS Aragat, which is a serious boost for their defense capabilities. This submarine can stay underwater for long periods, is highly stealthy, and is armed with nuclear missiles that can hit targets over 3,500 kilometers away. This is a big deal, especially when you consider that China is ramping up its naval presence in the region, conducting military drills, and showcasing its own impressive fleet. To keep pace, India has allocated nearly $4 billion in the 2024 to 2025 budget to upgrade its navy, focusing on submarines, aircraft carriers, and new ships. By 2030, India plans to have 24 submarines and 3 aircraft carriers, a massive boost from where they are now. Now, while India is making these strides, there's no denying that China is still ahead in terms of numbers. China already has over 60 submarines and 3 aircraft carriers, compared to India's 2 carriers and 16 submarines. But the gap is closing, and India's growing naval strength is starting to turn heads, especially in the Indian Ocean. Both countries are constantly watching each other's moves, and every decision matters as tensions rise over who will dominate these strategic waters. India is definitely making waves in the region, and its moves are forcing China to rethink its strategy. The battle for influence in the Indian Ocean is just getting started, and both powers are gearing up for a long-term standoff. India is definitely not going it alone when it comes to countering China's influence. In 2024, India teamed up with the US, Japan, and Australia for a massive naval exercise under the Quad framework, with over 4,000 personnel involved. These exercises are crucial because they ensure that, in case things heat up, these countries can coordinate seamlessly in a crisis. But India's strategy goes beyond just adding more ships. The Navy is diving into cutting-edge technology, like unmanned underwater vehicles and advanced submarines, ensuring it's prepared for whatever comes next. However, the challenge is far from easy. China has its own strategy, building strong relationships with smaller, economically weaker countries in the region. These countries often rely on China for infrastructure and development, giving China an upper hand when it comes to influence. This is a key element of China's Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, which began in 2013. The BRI is a huge infrastructure and trade project aimed at connecting Asia, Europe, and Africa through roads, railways, and ports. While it sounds great on paper, boosting global trade, India has been wary from the start, especially since some of these projects are happening in countries near India's borders. A big issue for India is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, which passes through parts of Jammu and Kashmir, a region that India claims. This isn't just a territorial dispute. India is also concerned about what's called debt trap diplomacy. This is where countries borrow heavily from China and struggle to repay, ultimately becoming dependent on China. India has made it clear that it doesn't want smaller countries falling into this trap, and it's offering a counterpoint with its own infrastructure initiatives. India's alternative to China's BRI is the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor, AAGC, a joint project with Japan focused on building infrastructure and supporting economic growth in Africa. This plan is aiming to invest over $10 billion in the coming years. Plus, India's Act East policy is all about strengthening ties with Southeast Asia, especially for its northeastern states. It's working on trade, connectivity, and security, ensuring that the region remains balanced, without a single power dominating. One of India's latest moves is leasing Sri Lanka's Matala airport. Why does this matter? Matala is strategically close to Hambantota, a port where China has a significant presence. The airport has struggled with low traffic since it opened in 2013, but with India's involvement, traffic and trade are expected to rise. This move is part of India's broader strategy to compete with China and gain more influence in South Asia. But India is not alone in this effort. The Quad, which includes the US, Japan, Australia, and India, has been growing more active in countering China. The Quad is about more than just military might. It's also about ensuring free and open trade and navigation in the Indo-Pacific. In 2024, joint military exercises among Quad countries jumped by 30%, showing their commitment to regional security. The Quad's strength lies in its combined military power. For example, the Malabar exercises in 2022 saw over 20 ships and submarines from all four countries working together, flexing their naval muscles in a show of strength against China's expanding fleet. But it's not just about military force. The Quad countries also strengthen their economic ties. India's trade with the US hit $165 billion in 2023, and its defense budget jumped to $76 billion. Together, the Quad countries have a combined defense budget of nearly $200 billion, making them a serious counterbalance to China. The Quad is also actively challenging China in the South China Sea, where China has been trying to expand its naval presence. The Quad conducts freedom of navigation operations, and the US Navy reports that these operations have increased by 50% since 2021. China isn't happy about it, but the Quad's increasing presence is putting real pressure on China. There's even talk that the Quad might grow. Countries like South Korea and Vietnam are already looking to build closer ties, which could make the Quad even stronger. If that happens, it could significantly shift the balance of power in the region, making it even harder for China to assert its dominance. In the end, the battle for influence in the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean is heating up. India, along with its Quad partners, is pushing back against China's ambitions, and the next few years could see major shifts in regional power dynamics. The stakes are high, and the competition is fierce. By 2024, India is not alone in its efforts to counter China's growing influence in the region. This year, India joined forces with the US, Japan, and Australia in a major naval exercise. Over 4,000 naval personnel took part in these exercises, which are designed to ensure that if tensions rise, these countries can operate seamlessly together. Looking ahead, India's strategy goes beyond just adding more ships to its fleet. The Indian Navy is also focusing on advancing technology with innovations like unmanned underwater vehicles and advanced submarines, aiming to stay sharp and ready for any situation. However, the challenge remains real. China's strategy of building closer ties with smaller, economically weaker nations in the region gives it a distinct advantage in terms of influence. While India is making progress, it still faces a tough game ahead. One of China's most ambitious foreign policy strategies is its Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, launched in 2013, which aims to create a massive network of trade routes and infrastructure projects across Asia, Europe, and Africa. China has invested heavily in roads, railways, ports, essentially any infrastructure you can think of. On the surface, it's about boosting global trade, but India has been wary of it from the start, mainly due to the implications it has for India's security and influence in the region. A major concern for India is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, which runs through areas of Jammu and Kashmir that Pakistan controls but that India claims as its own. India has made it clear that it will not accept this project, viewing it as a violation of its territorial integrity. India's foreign minister recently underscored that the country's objections to the BRI are not just about borders. They also concern what's known as debt trap diplomacy. This refers to smaller countries borrowing large sums from China, only to find themselves unable to repay, which ultimately leaves them economically dependent on China. India isn't just sitting back and watching, though. It has been working with Japan on a project known as the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor, AAGC, aimed at boosting infrastructure and economic growth in Africa as an alternative to the BRI. India plans to invest over $10 billion in the coming years to support this initiative. By positioning itself as a counterbalance to China's influence, India is building stronger partnerships with countries that share similar concerns about China's rise. Through the Quad, comprising India, the US, Japan, and Australia, India is pushing for a free and open Indo-Pacific, and cooperation among these nations is ramping up. In 2024, joint military exercises among Quad countries increased by 30%, highlighting the growing commitment to securing shared interests in the region. From an economic perspective, India is also positioning itself as an attractive alternative to China's Belt and Road Initiative. India's foreign direct investment, FDI, in 2023 was around $84 billion, signaling strong confidence from global investors. The Indian government is focusing on transparency and sustainability in its infrastructure projects, which appeals to countries that want to avoid the pitfalls of China's aggressive financing model. Furthermore, India's Act East policy aims to strengthen connections with Southeast Asia, especially its northeastern states, reinforcing its role as a key player in the region. At the broader level, India's stance is about promoting a multipolar world where power isn't dominated by just one or two major players. India is working to keep the region balanced, not just for its own benefit, but for the smaller nations that are feeling the pressure of China's influence. A recent example of this strategy is India's decision to lease Sri Lanka's Matala airport. This airport is strategically located near China's significant Hambantota port, and while Matala has struggled with low traffic since opening in 2013, India saw an opportunity. In 2023, Matala saw around 1.5 million passengers, and with India's involvement, that number is expected to rise, further cementing India's position as a regional competitor to China. But India is not alone in this pushback. In 2007, a powerful alliance of countries came together to specifically counter China's influence in the Indo-Pacific. The Quad, comprising the US, Japan, Australia, and India, wants to ensure that the Indo-Pacific remains open and free, allowing countries to trade, navigate, and move around without being dominated by a country like China. According to the US State Department, the Quad isn't just focused on military issues. It also tackles challenges like climate change, economic growth, and countering the rise of authoritarianism in the region. One of the things that makes the Quad so powerful is its joint military drills, like the Malabar exercises. These drills bring together the naval forces of all four countries, and in 2022, over 20 ships and submarines took part. These exercises serve as a show of strength, signaling that the combined naval power of the Quad is more than capable of challenging China's expanding fleet. But the Quad isn't just about military muscle. The countries are also strengthening their security ties. For instance, in 2023, India signed a $4 billion deal with the US to upgrade its air defense. Japan and Australia are also key players in these efforts, sharing intelligence and conducting joint training exercises, which makes the security network even more robust. All of this is making it harder for China to push its agenda around the region. On the economic front, Quad countries are increasingly doing business with one another, particularly in tech and defense. For example, India's trade with the US reached $165 billion in 2023, and India's defense budget has also surged to $76 billion. Japan and Australia are also ramping up their defense spending, and together, the Quad nations now have a combined defense budget of nearly $200 billion. This is putting significant pressure on China. The Quad has been especially active in countering China's moves in the South China Sea, where China has been trying to expand its naval presence. The Quad countries have conducted freedom of navigation operations, which the U.S. Navy reports have increased by 50% since 2021. China is clearly unhappy about this, but there's a twist. The Quad might actually expand. Countries like South Korea and Vietnam are already considering closer ties with the alliance, and if more countries join, the group could become even stronger, presenting a major challenge to China. Experts suggest that an expanded Quad could shift the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific, putting more pressure on China's ambitions. It seems that it's only a matter of time before we see who will dominate the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean, and whether China's growing influence can be contained by a united front led by India and its partners.